something a little different. I wanted to have a look at differences between universities in Australia, US and the UK. So this is actually a reaction to a video from a channel called Lost in the Pond, and the guy on this channel is originally British, now living in the US. So he has this unique perspective which he can bring through his channel, where he can look at the difference between things in the US and the things in the UK. And I found this video quite interesting because there were some things that surprised me. I thought that for the most part we would be all the same as the UK, but it didn't quite fall that way. So I'm going to look at what he says about differences between universities in the US and the UK, and then just add in, well, compare that to Australian universities. So let's jump in and see what he has to say.
Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to university, or as it's known in America, college. And you might be thinking, Lawrence, it must have been a long time ago since you were at university. Why didn't you make this video when you were still in your early 20s? And my answer to that is simple. YouTube didn't exist yet. And the other reason that it's taken me this long is that I am incredibly lazy, just like I was when I was a student. And when I was a student, I attended Lancaster University on the west coast of England. And I didn't know it yet, but it was there that two things happened that would prove very relevant to this video. Number one, I developed a pretty robust understanding of the sort of general university life in England. And number two, long-time subscribers will know that it was at university that I met my now American wife. And if you yourself are not yet subscribed to this channel, do that now. In the meantime, I'm going to turn into an American college bro with a British accent and talk about all of the ways that British and American colleges are very different.
Okay, so normally I would have edited out a lot of that introductory stuff, because I do like people to go across and watch the entire video for themselves if it is someone like this who is a good creator. But at the same time, I thought it really showcased what he's like, just to give you a real feel for what this channel is like, in case you were wondering if you might like it and you might like to go across and have a look. So I love just his rhythm. He just has this way of narrating that just does have quite a rhythm to it. So let's carry on and find out what he has to say.
We cannot talk about this topic without first talking about some of the ways that university terms differ on either side of the pond. As I've already pointed out, institutions of higher education are usually known as university in the UK and college in America. That said, individual American colleges like, say, Harvard or Yale do contain the word university, and the reverse is sometimes true in Britain, as evidenced by the likes of Imperial College London.
Okay, so it goes without saying that here in Australia we call it a university. It was interesting that he spoke about some UK universities having college in their names, because generally you don't get that here. I can't think of any examples of where that could actually occur. Let me know if I'm wrong, if you know of a university that does actually use college in its name.
But those two terms get even more confusing when you consider the fact that, firstly, in Britain, college is where we do our sixth form education between the ages of 16 and 18, but it doesn't end there.
Okay, so I created a bit of controversy last time I started speaking about what a college is in Australia on one of my videos, because it turns out that it is very different between states. So I mentioned that in Tasmania, college is years 11 and 12. And there were some people who got quite heated over that and told me college is not years 11 and 12. But yes, in Tasmania it is. And in some areas in Victoria, So, for example, here in Bendigo, there are it is a similar system to what you have in Tasmania. So, some of the high schools end at year 10, and then the kids go to college for year 11 and 12. But then you have differences again in that some high schools call themselves, or some private schools, I should say, call themselves colleges in Tasmania and possibly in Victoria. I know in Tasmania you have St Virgil's College. That is a boys' school which goes, I think it actually goes up to year 12 now. But either way, it goes all grades right up through. Same with St Mary's College, I believe it's still called that, which is primary through to also, I think, year 12. Please let me know. I'm a little bit out of touch when it comes to Tasmanian schools. But then here in Victoria, you have high schools that are called colleges because they have specialties. So you may have a high school that specialises in offering a fine arts program. So then that high school is called something or other college. So that does start to get a little bit confusing. I've been told that in New South Wales, for example, you don't call years 11 and 12 college, you call them high school. For me, in my mind, I think high school, I think years 7 to 10.
Because Americans, what do you call the place on campus where students reside? This is usually known as dorms, short for dormitories. And in Britain, that word is usually reserved for things like boarding school, where you've got like a number of people in one room. In a university context, we might refer to that as halls of residence, or, this is where it gets confusing, college. For instance, my dorm room was in Grisdale College within Lancaster University.
Now, I can't speak for other states, but I know that in Tasmania, that is the same case. So the residential halls in Tasmania, like for TasUni, are called such and such college. So that's another interesting thing where we do definitely come in the same as the UK. As for mainland universities, I couldn't tell you. I would have to actually ask. You'd think I would know because I have nieces who've been through university. I've got one niece who's currently at Monash University. Two of those have been in university residences, but I'm not sure if I've ever heard them refer to them as colleges.
Which had several other colleges. We'll get onto those in a bit. In both countries, an academic year is broken up into sections, and those sections in this country, as in the United States, are known as semesters. However, in Britain, the term for this is term.
So, at a university level at least, Australia is more in line with the US. So, with the universities here, we refer to the semester, not to the term. But then when you look at different states, when it comes to schools, there's a lot of confusion there because you get some public schools that use term, and then even within some states you might have public schools using term, private schools using semester. It may be different between different states. I'm not sure entirely about that. But I know that in Tasmania, for example, in high schools and primary schools, it's always first term, second term, third term. But I have heard some private schools refer to them as semesters.
And to this day, I often hear Americans talk about majoring in a subject. That's a term you don't really hear in the UK. Like Americans, one of our alternative terms might be to study a subject or to do a subject. I did English. Or, and this one's slightly more archaic these days, I read English.
And again, we actually align more with the US. So when you're talking about an undergraduate degree at least, you talk about majoring in a particular subject. So when I did my first degree, I majored in Japanese. You tend not to call your other bits, though, minors. So if you're talking about other units that you did that weren't part of your major, then you might say, yes, I studied English at university. But you do tend to differentiate between studying something and majoring in something. So I think we definitely are more like the US there than the UK.
For me, it's been almost a quarter of a century, but I can just about remember the application process for selecting the university that I wanted to go to. This was done through a body called UCAS, and through UCAS you apply to 5 universities in the subject that you want to study. So in my case that was English language, and I applied to Wolverhampton, Edge Hill, Sheffield, York and Lancaster. York rejected me even though I got the grades they wanted, and Lancaster accepted me, so I know who I would side with in the War of the Roses. In the US, this application process is slightly different. I was talking to my wife about it this morning, and she said that you could apply to as many colleges as you want. The only thing with that is there is a fee attached, which seems to vary from university to university. I should note that this is also true in the UK. I didn't remember that part because my parents probably paid for it.
You're kidding me, right? You have to pay an actual fee just to apply for a university in the UK or the United States. That's insane, especially if in the United States where they're applying for multiple universities. Now, here in Australia, as far as I know, there's no cost for applying to go to universities, and as far as I know, there's no cap on how many universities you can actually apply for. You look for the course that you're interested in, and you apply for whichever universities are offering that course, whether it be 2, 3, 6, whatever. I have to confess, I actually, for both my university degrees, only applied to one university. Maybe I was just overly confident, but I guess I never thought about the possibility of not getting in, which is scary thought. Probably makes me look bad, but that's what it is. But at the same time, I know that when my nieces applied for universities, they applied for multiple universities. Maybe it's become more competitive. I'm not sure.
But the point is, if you are really loaded, I suppose you improve your chances of getting approved. But the other thing that she said to me that I don't think I knew until researching this video was that you don't necessarily have to determine there and then what it is you want to study. Now this will depend on the college, but at some, it turns out, you can just say, I haven't decided yet, or I'm undecided. And I'll wing it. I'll figure it out as the year progresses.
Okay, so that's definitely another thing that is so different from Australia. Here, you have to apply for the course that you are doing. As far as units, now I can't remember that far back in terms of my first university degree, whether or not I had to choose my units. I think I probably chose my units after my acceptance into university. But you certainly wouldn't be able to start the school year without having chosen the units that you were going to do for that year. So it seems a bit crazy to me, and perhaps why you hear of all these people who flunk out of college in the United States, because they are heading off to college with no idea of what they're doing. which to me sounds like a heck of a waste of money.
Which brings us on quite neatly to this. That's right, the academic portion of university. The academic side of things is vastly different from one country to the other. Firstly, there's the timeline. I finished and started my undergraduate degree in 3 years. And that's not because I'm some sort of gifted child, although Mum, if you want to confirm in the comments. It's also because that's just the norm for most non-scientific degrees in the UK. But from those American friends or girlfriends of young dashing Lawrence, I discovered that the norm in America is 4 years. And at first I couldn't wrap my head around why it took an extra year just to learn shit. And I suppose it's because in America, during that first year particularly, they take other classes, often general studies, that have nothing to do with the major. In fact, that major could and often does change. In fact, according to most estimates, at least a third of US students change their major at least once. In the UK, there is less flexibility around this because, well, our choice of major is declared during the application phase and plays a big part in the university's decision to accept us.
Wow, so making it a 4-year course, to me that just sounds like a big money-making thing. I guess there's some similarities in that with some degrees that are more specialist, like doing a law degree, which is like I think a 5-year degree in Australia, that you would start off by doing like an undergraduate degree first. So you may do arts law, where for your first year of uni you do mostly arts subjects and maybe one like introduction to law or something, and you gradually drop the arts subjects so that then you graduate, I think, from arts and then you finish your law degree. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's been so long since I was at university. So I guess there is some similarity there where you do have those higher university degrees where you do undergraduate degrees as part of it. But to actually just spend a year just doing a random degree or random topics just because just seems insane to me. As for choosing a major, I don't know if it's changed. Like I said, it's been a while since I did my first degree, but basically up until even when you are choosing your subjects for third year, then it's still versatile. You know, in first year you choose your 4 different subjects, and then one of those you're going to drop, and then, you know, second year you're doing 3 subjects, and then it's really only when you're enrolling for third year university that you truly need to decide what your major is going to be. And that's when you home in on what you are studying there, and you study that particular subject for the entire year. So I guess that is a little different. I think it's a better structure that way because, I mean, you can go in, I know for me, I went in studying history, Japanese, and ancient civs or classics, I think it was called, and, you know, discovering that history was really intensive and Japanese was really intensive. So for me, that helped guide me in terms of what I was going to study in second year, because I knew that I had to drop either or if I was going to make it right through my degree because they were so intensive. I knew that I wanted to major in Japanese, so history had to go by the wayside, which meant, you know, as you go through the year, you get a feel for what subjects are going to suit you best, if that makes sense. You know, having to decide at the very beginning when you apply for your degree, that's a bit of a challenge.
In Britain, for all 3 years, you focus on your major and maybe some minors as well. For example, I did linguistics and creative writing. And my grades looked a lot different to those of my wife, and not just because she tried harder. You see, while an A grade, or a first, is anything above 70% in the UK, American undergraduates must achieve 90% or above to attain the same grade. At the other end of the spectrum, anything below 60% will earn you a fail in the US, while British students can still pass with a score as low as 40. And you might be thinking, ooh, Lawrence, does this mean that grades are earned differently in each country? And the answer to that is yes. While the final grade for a US undergraduate hangs on their grade point average, or GPA, the fate of British undergraduates is determined by their performance in end-of-year exams, as well as their dissertation. I'm also under the impression that in the UK we have more lectures than American students might be used to, which is why I slept through half of my degree. That said, it's not the only reason.
Okay, so I know that these days the grading system is very different at universities. I don't know if they still use that whole bell curve thing where basically, oh, well, this number of students got this grade, so you can't have this grade, we're going to give you the lower grade. I've never really understood the bell curve. To me, it's insane. But yeah, I don't know if that is still used at universities. I don't know if that's more of a faculty thing as well. But certainly, yeah, I honestly cannot comment on how grading works in universities these days. But I do feel intense anxiety when I think about the number of exams that we had to do during my undergraduate degree. So, yeah. Lectures, I wouldn't know how many lectures students attend in the UK or the US, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that either. But it did feel, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, that we were there pretty much all day, every day, just about.
That's right, the other reason that I found myself waking up at 2 p.m. was campus culture. That is, all of the things that embody the social aspects of university life. In Britain, these centre around a couple of things, one of which is drinking. Now, bear in mind that in the UK, the legal drinking age is 18. So when you get to university, even in your first week, which is known as Freshers' Week, you not only get absolutely bladdered if you are the sort of person that drinks alcohol, but it's encouraged by the student union, because everyone does it. It's legal. There's no problem. This I found to not be true in America, where of course students drink, but remember that half the students, the younger half, are underage, and under those circumstances it's sort of hard to market your on-campus events and things like that as an opportunity to get drunk. Now that might be a good thing, because I remember during my own Freshers' Week I got absolutely rat-arsed every night.
Now, I'm going to sound like a nerd, but that's another thing that I can't really comment on. I know that in terms of people who were at university accommodation, they may have partied a little bit more than those of us who weren't at university accommodation. But for me, I worked my way through my first university degree, so I was doing a full-time university degree plus working 40-hour work week, so I just didn't have time to party. So that side of it, I really couldn't tell you what the culture is like, but I do get a feel that perhaps UK and US culture is perhaps for once a little bit more party focused than Australian culture, based on my friends, based on family, and that I think, of everyone I know that's been to university, it wasn't such a big thing. The main focus was learning. And I think, like I said, I think if you were in university accommodation, then people did play up a little bit. But yeah, like I said, I don't think I'm really in a position to explain that one because I I didn't do that.
And when I was at university, drinking seemed to fuel a lot of the inter-college rivalries. Like the Grisdale College people really didn't like the Pendle College people. And so if one person drank enough tequila and the wind blew in a weird direction, another person might have their trousers pulled down just because they happen to belong to different accommodation. Now, thankfully, you don't encounter that specific issue in the US very much, but I could be wrong because I never attended an American university, but there does seem to be a little bit of a rivalry that emerges between these Greek sororities and or fraternities. And students that belong to these will talk about Greek Life, which is not a magazine about Athens, but is sort of a collective term for all of these sororities and fraternities because their names all contain Greek letters. And this concept was all Greek to me because in Britain we don't have this. But these
Face it, nobody outside of America understands sororities and fraternities because it is a purely American thing. I kind of have gained a bit of a grasp of it over the years, but it still just seems so very foreign to me.
groups in US colleges get together and sort of talk about leadership skills and academia and other stuff that I've never yet been privy to because I've never attended one of these things. I just imagine that these are sort of future world leaders plotting to take over the world by turning everybody into a mouse. Sure, it's not quite as sinister as that, and I understand that members of these organisations are members for life. So it makes me wonder, do members meet up when they're like 60 years old and have a reunion? Or do you just do it for the first few years after graduation and then eventually lose touch like I did with all of my friends? When I was at university in England, there were two ways that you could tell who was an American student. Number one, how they pronounced everything. And number two, they like to wear sweaters and or hoodies denoting the university from whence they came. And I think this is a big difference between British and American students. It's not that we can't buy regalia pointing out our university. It's just that it's not such a big deal to us. And it's not a case that Americans happen to be part of alumni programs like my wife is and that the British somehow aren't, because we are. I get these magazines, or at least I used to until they started making me feel old. It's that America puts much more of a national focus on university sports teams than we do in Britain. So
when I was at university, you never would have seen anyone wearing anything with the university's name on it. It just wasn't done. As for university sports, yeah, nothing at all like American or British sports. I mean, in Australia, it's more of a game just in a paddock, just about, when you compare it to America and Britain. I mean, who even knows when a game is on at a university? I can remember when I was doing my first university degree, and sometimes I would catch a bus home rather than drive in because the parking was a nightmare. And to do that meant walking down through the sports field, which was just a big oval, and you just see people playing a sport there and think, well, is that like a proper game, or are they just, what's going on? So, university sports in Australia, major non-event.
there's a major event on, like the college basketball tournament that happens every March. People who graduated from the university that happen to make it to the final and sportsed harder than the other team get to cheer for that. We don't have anything equivalent to that in the UK except the Cambridge versus Oxford rowing. And most of us didn't go to Cambridge or Oxford, and most of us don't know how to row. So we have no real need to maintain this strong affiliation with our university.
Well, we don't even have college rowing here. So at the end of the day, in Australia, you graduate from uni, that's it. See you later, baby. You forget it even existed. I know for years I used to get this alumni magazine, but I never even used to read it. I used to just turf it because, it just didn't interest me. So thanks for listening. I know I probably haven't been as knowledgeable about some of the things discussed in this, and I would love to hear other people's perspective. I'd definitely love to hear about differences between other states, because my knowledge is very much based on Tasmania and Victoria. So thanks for listening. If you're new, please do subscribe, hit the like button, and also please leave a comment below, helping to get these videos out into the algorithm and get them seen by more people. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.